Thank you for joining me back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to jump right away into our third segment, the eternal rivalry, the eternal discussion between the players and the referees in any sport, really, not just the NFL. You always have the typical players arguing with the referees, getting teed up or getting thrown a flag, getting shown a yellow card, whatever the case may be. It's a tale as old as time with this, but in the NFL, it has seemed, I think, in some people's mind, start to become a real issue of these decisions by these referees really becoming a factor in affecting the games. And I will get to the example you see now on your screen, but to sort of give you a background and a little bit of context between this, the Athletics' Kalen Kaller wrote an article about the officiating in the NFL over the last few years, and there was some reports from former officials and former vice presidents, officials in the refereeing department that chimed in this article. One of them, a former official, reported and said back on Friday in this article that 27 officials have 3 years or less, and about a third of the officials nowadays have about 5 years or less of experience in the NFL and, refereeing these games. Most officials agree that it takes about 5 years to become proficient at the NFL level, and 27 referees currently have 3 years or less, and about a third of the officials, of the 120 officials in the NFL, have 5 years or less. So that was what Kaller reported back on Friday in her article, and already that stat is pretty eye-opening just because you'd expect some of these referees to know what they're doing or be at least confident in what the decision-making process is, what all the rules are, and with so many years of experience, you pretty much assume that they're making the right decision most of the time, but that assumption probably turns out to be wrong if there's really not a lot of referees with over 5 years of experience at this highest level, and it might not seem too important to some that, might not be too engaged in the NFL or too familiar with what is going on in some of these officiating decisions in the NFL. But at the end of the day, with this being the highest level and this being obviously the NFL level with so much riding on every single week out of the 17 games to really determine your playoff seedings, determine just the momentum of some games, big wins, big momentum swing games that could happen. And if you're potentially cheated out of something in your estimation, that could really rub you the wrong way. But at the same time, to continue on with this report from Kaller in her article, other former NFL officials also chimed in on the issue, and one of them said it used to be that every crew had at least 4 or 5 experienced officials, one former referee said, and another one chimed in and stated, now you can't find a crew that has 4 strong officials anyway as well. So the issues around the referees have all sort of been really starting to build up over the last few years, even coming from former officials as well. And Kaller continued to write on in her article that these issues aren't just found at the highest level, but really can trickle down all the way down to the high school level in some of these games, not just in football, but also around other sports as well. And Bill Topp also was quoted in this article. Bill Topp is the president of the National Association of Sports Officials, and he sort of explained that the reality is we are taking more assignment chances than we ever have. We're putting people on games that we believe aren't quite ready, but the numbers are forcing it. Really just going to the fact that there's just not enough resources and not enough numbers there to produce this high experienced officials or just a crew of very experienced officials for a game at a certain point. They're sort of spread thin. It seems to be the biggest point made out of this whole situation, and with it, trickling down to such a minor level in high school, going up through college and then up until the NFL probably as well. This is something that might not be of too much importance to some people out there who don't pay attention too much to the referee decisions, but that brings me to this example that you see on your screen. Week 13, the Kansas City Chiefs at the Green Bay Packers. Pass interference calls that could have been called, that probably should have been made, in my opinion, and probably in a lot of people's opinions who saw this game. The Packers ended up winning this game, and it ended up coming down to a Hail Mary. That's how close these decisions and some of these calls that the referees make can really have a major impact on this game, because you see there on your left, on my left side of the screen, you have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, running down the field, being covered by a Packers defensive back, and they're both looking up at the ball, and obviously you see the defensive back for the Packers getting there way too early and making contact with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, trying to play the ball through the receiver. Obviously, it seems like a pretty obvious pass interference call, but it wasn't called on the day, and the Kansas City Chiefs were pretty irate about it. They obviously got in the referee's face and complained about it afterwards as well. But even so, it did come down to a Hail Mary opportunity there towards the end, and again, you see another opportunity where the ref could have possibly blown a pass interference call. If you see there in the middle of that giant pile, you see Travis Kelce there, the number 87, sort of being held by Devondre Campbell, not really giving him an opportunity to jump up and try to contest the catch and try to catch it in the end zone. And again, that could have been called a pass interference, but that one's a little bit more lenient just because, it is a Hail Mary. Everybody's in there trying to nudge and maneuver their way towards the ball. So I can see that one a little bit not being called, but the one on the left is pretty obvious to me. Pretty incredible that it wasn't called a pass interference call. And that's only one example, but if you keep going, just a few weeks after that, to week 17, this one's a bit more obvious. This one caused a lot of commotion and a lot of attention around sports media and just the NFL in general. If you remember week 17, Monday Night Football, the Detroit Lions played at the Dallas Cowboys, and it came down to the last play. The Lions scored a potential go-ahead touchdown, but they were 1 point away from tying the game with the extra point or going for two and winning the game with about 25 to 23 seconds left, I want to say, if my memory serves me right. And they drew up a pretty great play. They drew up a play action pass there to the running back. Jared Goff looks right, and to the left, trailing off to the side, is Taylor Decker, who catches the ball in the end zone, and everybody thinks the two-point conversion worked miraculously. The courage from the Detroit Lions to do something at this moment, but then it was blown dead and ruled off because the official claimed that he never registered himself as eligible, him being Taylor Decker. And if you see the images, obviously I can't play them on here, the videos, but if you go back and look at it on social media, you could see that the offensive linemen, a few of them actually go up to the official, and you could assume they said that they're reporting as eligible, but it all became really confusing. How could the ref not think that they're registering themselves as eligible? What else could they have been saying going up to the official like that? But he claimed that they didn't, and it was blown dead, and they tried it a couple more times. There was a bunch of penalties and stuff like that until obviously the Detroit Lions didn't get it in the end, and they ended up losing that game in week 17. And obviously they go on to have a great playoff run, but that really was a major point of, messing up for the referee, because, what else in that situation could they have been saying to the official to not register as eligible? And then other examples that I couldn't find the evidence of, but a few years ago, if you remember, the Rams and Saints had a game, and one defensive back completely ran over a wide receiver in that game, not called a pass interference. The Rams defensive back blindsided and clearly took out the Saints wide receiver, not called a pass interference, and Sean Payton was pretty irate about it during the game and afterwards. And that's just a few examples of where this is sort of heading towards with the officials in the NFL. And is this a major question, or is this a major issue right now? For right now, I would say I would classify it as manageable, but it could obviously get worse if the NFL doesn't find the numbers to sort of get more people in here, more experienced referees to referee these games, obviously, and have more experienced crews out there to provide the best service for these games. You could look at it as a moment where it is in transition. You obviously have referees that don't have too much experience, but you wait it out a couple years and they could gain that experience and you could gain the numbers that way. Or you could look at it as a declining number, and you could think that it isn't going to get much better. It could actually get a little bit worse if you already have low numbers. What makes you think that it's going to grow? Those are two different points of view that you can have on the situation. I'd like to side with the more positive side and anticipate this number growing over the next few years, but it really just comes down to the obvious reason that in sports, if you have any idea related to sports or what is entailed with being a referee, you know that you're constantly going to get critiqued, chastised, whatever you want to say in a game where you make a call that one team hates, one team loves, and then you're just going to get talked about it for the longest of times, and it's starting to become more of a reputation that some referees, build for themselves. And really, talking honestly here, it doesn't seem like a job that many people would want. So you could obviously understand the declining numbers, but in terms of financial issues and situations, this for the NFL, being a referee for the NFL, it is so almost like a part-time sort of job and role that these people have to take up, because the NFL doesn't really compensate the referees for too much, and it is something that obviously is an issue and something that the referees would want to get and be full-time workers, employees for the NFL to sort of just deal with all of this criticism that they get from people and around the league. But because it's considered a part-time job and it isn't really valued as much by former officials and current officials around the NFL as well, you can see why the numbers are starting to decline. In the NFL, if they really want to do something about it, they might have to just cough up some extra money and pay the referees to really provide the best service. Because if you're not getting paid enough as you would think you are valued by doing such a job that not a lot of people want to do, you're not getting paid enough, you're getting critiqued all the time, and you're just getting told over and over that, you stink at your job, you're not going to do the best at it, and also you could just drop it and think that this isn't worth it and just leave, which seems to be the main reason behind all of this. And it isn't in a good spot right now. A bad relationship starting to build up between the refs and the NFL, and it is, again, something the NFL could address with going to the head of the officials and working out something to maybe compensate them a little bit better for the job that they do. But it doesn't seem to be the case right now. You don't have any inclination that the NFL is heading towards that way. So this could maybe get a little bit worse over the next few years if the numbers don't start to grow. But hopefully there could be a resolution for this, because you just simply can't have these issues popping up around some of these games. You look at this in Week 17, you're right before the playoffs, and this didn't affect these two teams that much, but it could have very well determined a playoff seeding or something like that. It made you the 1 seed or win you the division or made you a wild card team. Things like that truly matter, and you can't have them be affected by refereeing decisions that are taken as to the level of seriousness that they should. And it is a growing problem. I think more people will start to understand that and see that, especially going into 2024 and afterwards as well. So we'll see how that all develops. Just really an eye-catching article that I saw recently in preparing for this show. But that's where we'll leave this topic, and we will move on with the rest of the show. Another quick break, and after that, we will get into the AFC East running back rankings to continue the series on this show. And also, going forward after that, some of the kickoff changes starting to create some new trends around returners and defenses around the NFL. Mike McDaniel talked about it. Justin Tucker mentioned it. Stick around to find out what they said, and we'll be right back after this break.